With all the attention on Paul Skenes coming into Tuesday's game between the Cardinals and Pirates, it wasn't really billed as a marquee pitching matchup, but perhaps it should have been after what Mikolas did. We'll talk about it and how I was shot by airsoft pellets, but I didn't know that at the time, walking back to my car after the game in downtown St. Louis. A lot to get to coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you, recording on the morning of Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. We're going to get into last night's Cardinals game. I know I normally have these posted overnight, but I just couldn't hack it last night. I've been under the weather and depriving myself of sleep a little too much. So after covering the game at Busch, it was, a little before 11:30. I was walking back to my car from the stadium. I parked pretty far away, as I sometimes have to do, because I get there late after doing my radio show from home. I was walking back to my car. I was trying to record a little video for YouTube just to let y'all know, hey, no podcast tonight. Don't wait up for it, but we'll have it tomorrow morning, I promise. And as I'm doing that, I got shot. Not by a real gun. I'm okay. It was either airsoft pellets or rubber Orbeez. I have no idea. It didn't hurt really that bad, but it was very jarring in the moment as I hear what sounded like semi-automatic gunfire out of the corner of my peripheral, and it's all on video. So I might just post the raw video to this YouTube channel at some point. I just wrapped up talking with the guys on 590 The Fan, Jim Hayes, Cam Jansen, Cole Bartemus, Charlie Marlowe, and Charlie's like, you got to post it. You got to post it with a bloody thumbnail. I'm like, I don't know if I want to get into all that, but we'll see. I did throw it out there on Twitter at B-Schaeffer12 if you want to see it, and I might do a separate video talking more about that. But today we're going to talk mostly about this Cardinals game, as Paul Skenes lived up to the billing on Tuesday night at Busch Stadium, but Mikolas far exceeded whatever his billing would have been. He didn't have much attention coming into this game, but he pitched damn well for the Cardinals. Unfortunately, the Cardinals were not able to get the win. They lose 2-1 to the Pirates, as the St. Louis Bats, as much as they did try to scratch and claw against young Mr. Skenes, they didn't get any runs against him, and then weren't able to capitalize against a Pirates bullpen that came into the night ranking number 25 in MLB in ERA. Reliever ERA, they were 25th, and the Cardinals couldn't really do much against them other than the Nolan Gorman home run in the ninth inning. They had chances to score. They couldn't capitalize. It's been the story of the season for the Cardinals so far, as they are down to a .212 batting average with runners in scoring position. That ranks 28th in baseball. So that reared its ugly head on Tuesday night, as did something that we've known to be true for some time, but I don't think there was a more prominent example of it all year than what happened last night. As you look at some of those late game scenarios where you might say, hey, this isn't really an ideal matchup, batter versus pitcher, should the Cardinals go with a pinch hitter? And there were a number of times in the latter innings where I think we were up in the press box asking that question, and most of the time Oli Marmol didn't make a move, but I also have a hard time blaming him, and we'll play some audio from last night's postgame with Oli Marmol, where I credit Katie Woo for doing a marvelous job in asking the questions that basically got Oli Marmol to concede that, yeah, the bench is limited in the ways that he's able to use it. And I think that puts the onus squarely on John Mozeliak to either just recognize that this is what he has built to this point, or maybe do something about it, which can be an uncomfortable conversation, because if you're doing something about it, it means you're kicking somebody or somebody's off the roster and going out and finding somebody new. But the utility of the Cardinals bench to be able to maneuver in the late innings is basically nil unless the Cardinals are already ahead. This is sort of the thing that this aspect wasn't talked about, but when the Cardinals are ahead, it actually works out fine, because you're usually bringing in a Michael Ciani off the bench for defense, or you're able to maneuver Brendan Donovan to accommodate any alignment defensively that you want, so that you can put the hands team out there, have the best defense possible, and go win the game with your bullpen. But when the Cardinals are behind, as they were last night, there's nothing Oli Marmol can do. Nothing that has an obvious answer to it. So we'll talk about what I mean by that. We'll hear from Oli Marmol basically saying, yep, it is what it is, and you work with what you've got. But I think that puts the onus on John Mozeliak. And for us to recognize that last night, that's a John Mozeliak loss by the St. Louis Cardinals. Look, there are other things that could have happened. You could have come through with runners in scoring position. Paul Skenes is tough to get to. could have maybe had an opportunity against one of those relievers that you take advantage of. Maybe Ryan Helsley. I mean, he had a bad night. Those are going to happen. He's not infallible. He came on in a tie game in the 9th, and I don't know if there's a different mentality for closers when they're not actually on for a save situation. This has been an oft-debated topic for years, but he was still pitching in the 9th inning. It's just it was a tie game, and he had to keep it there and couldn't do it. Walked a couple, gave up a hit, and from there, just a unfortunate fluke play that Mason Wynn was not quite able to complete on the throw home with the fielder's choice. So we'll talk about all that on B-Schaeff Daily today. Appreciate you guys for joining me. Again, comment away on anything you want to from this Cardinals game, from my shooting experience that was a little scary, got to be honest with you. Like I said, for maybe another video, I'll get more into that because I don't want to upset anybody that just doesn't want to hear much about that type of event. But we'll talk Cardinals here on the show, and we do that all season. So if you like Cardinals content, you came to the right place. Hit that subscribe button on your screen to subscribe to the Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer, YouTube channel as we dive into this baseball club every day, all year long. Let's start, though, with the pitching matchup from last night. Paul Skenes v. Miles Mikolas. It lived up to the hype, although, like I said, I don't really know that there was a lot of hype surrounding the matchup. There was hype surrounding, hey, Paul Skenes is here. But Miles Mikolas, for as much as he's been more solid in recent weeks, his ERA, even since like the good start of his season and like late April was about when he really started to turn the corner and at least have more consistent quality starts and the type of starts where you'd say he's giving you a chance to win. Prior to the game on Tuesday, 7 of his previous 8 starts, I would classify as Miles Mikolas gave the Cardinals a chance to win. Didn't give up more than 3 runs, went 6 innings in the games that he did give up 3 runs. Had a couple where he went 5 and change and allowed 1 or 2 runs. So they were in the mix every single time with him, except for one where he gave up 6 runs. And because he wasn't really having those scoreless outings, he was never lowering his ERA very significantly. He went 5 starts in a row from May 12th to June 5th, where 4 of them were quality starts, which is 6 innings, 3 runs or better. And one of them wasn't a quality start, but he allowed 1 run in 5 innings. But he only lowered his ERA over that span from 6.19 to 5.32 for the season. So kind of, just kind of middling there, which is why I think coming in, people weren't really looking at Miles Mikolas to be able to go toe-to-toe with Paul Skenes. He did that, though, and then some. 7 innings, which is more than Skenes provided. He had 6 1/3. It was interesting to see the Pirates actually bring Skenes out for the 7th. I think that's the first time they've done that this year. And he recorded 1 out. Nolan Arenado got him for a double, and that chased him from the game. Arenado had a great game, by the way. I know he struck out in the 9th when they were hoping to get a little bit of a rally going there late, but he had a couple of hits, and 3 times he took the extra base, going first to third on a single to right by Donovan, which, I mean, is the type of fundamental thing you want to see, but Arenado is the slowest guy on the team. Right, that's how I've always viewed him. And so he makes that play on the double that chased Skenes in the 7th. It was not really quite in the left field corner. It was softly hit enough that I thought the fielder could come up charging, and that's not a double. He's probably not even going to try, but he did, which was impressive. And then he took third base at one point when he was standing on second base by advancing on a sacrifice fly to left center. The center fielder caught it, so it was a little bit shaded more towards center than left. But just 3 different times where I'm like, Arenado is playing to win tonight. And he made an unbelievable double play that allowed Mikolas to escape the 7th inning after his no-hitter was broken up. Both pitchers had a no-hitter going into the 4th. Mikolas kept his perfect game going through the 4th. Alec Burleson got the first hit off of Paul Skenes in the bottom of the 4th inning, I believe it was. And Mikolas kept it going, had a perfect game going until he walked Yasmani Grandal in the 6th, and then the 7th is when the no-no was busted up. And I led my story with this. I tweeted it out as well before I posted my story because I thought if somebody else makes this joke before I do in the lead sentence to my article for KMOV, then that's going to look like I copied them and took it from them. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? In the modern era, I guess you got to think about some of these things. I said, I'm going to tweet it out so that everybody knows I made the joke. And then that allows me to use it on my story for those who don't use Twitter. I don't like to double dip on that. You like to save things that you use on Twitter. And then, some things are better used for your article. And you just don't tweet it out. But I said, if I had a nickel for every time Miles Mikolas has lost a no-hitter on an extra inning base hit by a Pirates outfielder to deep center, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird. It's happened twice, which is the same way back almost 2 years ago to the day, June 14th, 2022, that Mikolas was 1 out away from the no-hitter, if you'll recall, against Pittsburgh. And Cal Mitchell hit, I believe it was a ground rule double over Harrison Bader in center because Bader was playing, it was a 9-0 game at the time. Bader was playing in a little bit to try to take away the bloop hit and secure that no-hitter for Mikolas, which I still think is what you'd prefer almost as a pitcher. You don't want to give it up on a bloop, but if they take you to the warning track, it's like, okay, wish he could have caught it, but at least I kind of have to own that one. He hit me hard. But that was 1 out away from a no-hitter, and it blew up on Mikolas. I think I've told that story, too, where I was at the game, covering that game in 2022, but my wife was pregnant at the time, and we had a little bit of a scare where we had to go to the hospital, and I had to leave in the 5th inning. And we're there at the hospital as I'm watching the no-hitter unfold. I'm thinking, this is unbelievable. First Cardinal no-hitter since 2001, Bud Smith, which I remember watching at the time as a kid. And I was at the damn game, and I'm going to miss it. But obviously, most important thing is family. So there was no thinking twice about leaving the game and going to be with my wife, and everything was okay with the baby and stuff. But we were watching on the little TV in the hospital room, and I'm thinking, 7th inning, 8th inning, I'm like, Mikolas, just give it up. Just give up a hit so I don't have to. It was about me at the time, right? I was selfish, but I was like, I don't want to miss this. But then once he got to the 9th inning, I was like, all right, I'm not gonna voodoo Miles Mikolas just because I'm not there. Like, he's a good dude. I hope he gets it. I was rooting for him to get it at that point. And he got 1 out away and couldn't get it. But this time he was, it was the 7th inning, so he was a little further from the glory when Brian Reynolds hit one to deep center field. And I don't know if there's going to be a chalk outline on that outfield wall where Michael Ciani slammed into it. There was a great photo from Associated Press. Michael Ciani slamming into the wall, and you could just see the ball tip off his glove or what. I guess I have to go back and watch it a little more closely to see how close he actually got to catching this ball. But that put a runner on third base in the 7th inning for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And you think at that point, not only is the no-hitter gone, but it's a 0-0 game. The game might be over at this point if they plate that run from third. And it was 1st and 3rd later in the inning, and that's when Arenado did his magic. And it was just, perfectly placed line drive where he was able to dive to his right to the backhand and basically slap the glove on the bag to double off the runner, getting Mikolas through 7, which was a great moment in the game. You think, all right, come on now. There's got to be a way here. Got to be a way for the Cardinals to lock this game up after something like that. And they just weren't able to do it. They just were not able offensively against the Pirates bullpen to make anything happen. They stranded runners at various times throughout the game. 0 for 7 with RISP. As I mentioned, they're 2-12 with RISP at this point in the year. It's only like the White Sox and Athletics or something, 2 teams that you don't want to be associated with that are below the Cardinals in the RISP category this year. And you knew it was going to be a tough one against Paul Skenes, but I really did think that they were going to be able to get him out of the game, 5 or 6 innings, work counts. That needed to have been the strategy coming in. But it's easier said than done when Paul Skenes is pumping strikes the way that he tends to. He's got 100 in the zone, and then the splinker that he throws, it's just tough to be able to do much to him. 103 pitches, I believe that's got to be a season high for Skenes, which makes it a career high since he's in his rookie year, only 6 starts into his MLB career. 74 strikes, though. So he was pumping strikes. Usually when a guy has a strike percentage, 70% or more, he's almost throwing too many strikes where you're able to, as a batter, go, well, I'm not really going to have to chase. He's gonna feed me something. But he's not feeding you at 100 miles per hour and at 94 with the splinker. And you hear the word splinker because it's not a splitter necessarily. It's not a sinker. It's kind of both. Split finger fastballs are usually a little lower in velocity than that, and they don't. Sinkers are, you might see sinkers in the mid 90s, or like Jordan Hicks throws his at 100, or used to anyway. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a pitch that plays, and you play it off 100. I can't imagine being in the batter's box facing that. So Paul Skenes is going to be a problem for a long, long time. Arenado said last night he's a problem. Skenes and Arenado also, they attended the same high school, not at the same time, obviously. But the same baseball coach, I believe, is still at that high school where Arenado went, and he remembers talked about last night, always coming home and asking every year, asking the coach, hey, who do we got? Who's coming up? And he said, well, coach said we got this catcher going to Air Force, which is like, all right, that's a big deal. That's a Division I scholarship. Like, it's pretty cool. And obviously Skenes ends up being a pitcher, ends up pitching so well at Air Force in his last year there that he has an opportunity to take this thing to the next level. He transfers to LSU, gets out of his agreement with the United States military, and the rest is history. Paul Skenes is going to be an NL Central fiend for years to come. And the Pirates, I mean, for their sake, they better never let him go. You got to sign that guy. But it's early, man. They'll have him for the next 6 years at least. We know that much. But he was very good. Cardinals offense was not as good, as they are unable to come up with the clutch hit. Gorman hits a homer. That's good to see. Kind of gave people some life going into that bottom of the ninth inning. And it was interesting, too, the moment where we thought the game was over, because the umpire at home plate ruled that it was a foul tip strike 3 on Ivan Herrera, who did pinch hit for Pages at that moment. One of the few late pinch hit situations the Cardinals actually went through with, which made sense. He's going to take a better AB in the ninth inning, regardless of left-right, than Pages at this point in Pages' career. And it was after a Jose Fermin walk, which that was another one. We were up in the press box going, all right, righty on the mound. Fermin's a righty in the batter's box. He had come in previously for Matt Carpenter to face a lefty earlier in the game, but now it's a righty versus righty. You have lefties on your bench. You have Dylan Carlson that could switch hit. He's had a couple of good ABs from the left side recently. And for as much as people, like, here's the thing that's tough when you're going to criticize the bench decisions, and we'll talk about it. I'll play the audio from Oli. Like, nobody is really out here stumping to see Brandon Crawford in that game, but that's what your bench is supposed to provide you. You need a lefty bat off the bench late, and probably more than one, because Carpenter was in your lineup. He would normally be that guy, and it's not like his numbers are very good this year either. He's hitting 194 with a 592 OPS now. So they just don't have any thump off the bench. Fermin's hitting 115, a 350 OPS. Pages is hitting 080, a 339 OPS. Siani's hitting 200 with a 502 OPS. Dylan and Brandon Crawford both have sub 500 OPSs with averages in the 100s. Like, they don't have a bench. And the bench that they do have, it's to serve very particular roles that are not honestly that useful. Like, we know Brandon Crawford is here to be the backup to Mason Wynn if something happens to Mason Wynn. But that's a one-track mind niche role for somebody on your bench to serve. That's all he does. They don't feel they can use him in a pinch hit spot because his bat's not robust enough, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And there were spots last night where you wonder, does Dylan Carlson make sense as a pinch hitter? Because for as much as he's had splits throughout his career, he is a switch hitter, and so you could deploy him against either a lefty or a righty, depending on whether he's a better option than whoever's out there. And when guys like Carpenter are in your lineup, and, you know, Pages, Siani, like, there are times where it's going to make sense that Carpenter is going to be a viable option, but he was in the starting lineup, so that doesn't end up being applicable. But it'd be nice for Oli Marmol to have somebody on his bench who wasn't hitting 100 with an OPS, you know, half of what a productive bench player would be. I mean, it's just his hands are tied. They really are. So you could have made the case that, and again, in the comments, if you would have liked to have seen Dylan come in for Siani at some point, or for Fermin, or for Crawford to come in for Siani at the end of the game, I wasn't even joking in the press box when I said the spot there in, I believe it was the 6th inning, where Michael Siani, this was their 5th inning, might have been the 5th inning, their best chance to score in the bottom of the 5th. Arenado singled. That's when Donovan pushed one through the right side, and Arenado went first to third. So you have first and third, nobody out. Carp strikes out, but then Skenes has a wild pitch to get Donovan to second, and this was your best chance to score. Runners on second and third, one out. Pages strikes out. Siani grounds out to the right side. I legitimately would have had Michael Siani bunt with 2 outs, because Rowdy Tellez is their first baseman who does not move well. and he was playing real far back. So if you're able to push that bunt toward the right side beyond the reach of Paul Skenes at that time, I think he might have been able to be safe at first, and that's an RBI. But it is absolutely piss poor that that's where we're at when it comes to in-game strategy with this Cardinals team with runners in scoring position, that I am actually advocating for a guy to bunt with 2 outs. Like, I genuinely don't think it would have been the wrong move, rather than try to think that Michael Ciani's going to get an honest-to-goodness base hit against Paul Skenes. No offense to Ciani, but not a lot of guys are getting hits off of Paul Skenes. I would have bunted. 100% would have bunted. And the fact that I can stand behind that and have that actually be my take speaks volumes about where the Cardinals are offensively. That's awful that that's the case. I don't feel good about it, but it would have been my take, I think, in that spot. But I want to talk about the late innings, different spots. Again, I think in that 5th inning, you're still kind of rolling with what got you here in the daily lineup. You're not looking to make any moves just yet. But in the 7th inning, you get Fermin to come in for Matt Carpenter, taking on a lefty, Aroldis Chapman. Although Jose Fermin against Aroldis Chapman, you don't really feel like is going to be a very productive moment. But that's what you end up doing in the 7th inning when you have Arenado to third base, another chance to score Arenado from third. They can't do it. Fermin lines out to right field. So they made the move there. That was a decision where they did bring on the pinch hitter. 8th inning, there's nobody on base, but Ciani takes the at-bat, stays in the game. Then they start to get a little bit of a rally going. Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson base hits. You're not going to pinch hit for Paul Goldschmidt, but I do think that's another example of making the case that Paul Goldschmidt does not need to be batting third anymore. Love Goldie, right? His numbers are not, he's got a lower OPS than Wynn, Burleson, than Gorman, then Arenado, then Donovan, then Ivan Herrera. I mean, he shouldn't bat third. It's mid-June. Maybe Goldie comes out of it and becomes the guy that he's always been, but he's not a number 3 hitter right now. But when I look at the bottom of the lineup and say you had 592 OPS, 339 OPS, 502 OPS with the final 3 spots, you can't get Goldie any lower than number 6 in your lineup most days. And even that's a little bit questionable. But I would move, I don't know what I'd do. Arenado looked good last night. Maybe it's Arenado, bump him to third right now if you want to go right, left, right, because Burleson's batting second. Win leadoff makes sense. You can bump Arenado to third, and then Gorman can stay clean up. Donovan maybe go to, you could flip Goldie and Arenado is maybe the best I can do. They don't have a full lineup right now. The numbers offensively in this lineup up and down. Goldie shouldn't be batting third, but I can sit here and really try and strain to find somewhere else to put him. And I'm having a hard time doing it because there's nobody coming up and saying, oh, that's my spot. Mason Wynn has grabbed the leadoff spot. Nobody else has really come up and grabbed anything from this Cardinal lineup. And then we know the bench is really weak as well. And I get it that nobody in the offseason was looking for John Mozeliak to make any groundbreaking moves for the starting lineup because we kind of expected it to be pretty decent. And I know you're missing Newt Barr right now and you're missing Wilson Contreras, and those 2 injuries, certainly you have those guys that makes your lineup look different. Every MLB team, though, has injuries, which is why you can criticize the construction of the bench coming into the year because you need bench guys that, when there are injuries, they're good enough to really step in and kind of hold serve in a lineup for a while you wait for your mainstay guys to get back. And the Cardinals just don't have that. They do not have a bench as constructed that has the versatility to step into the lineup or that has the versatility to take a late game at bat off the hands of a lesser hitter who might have been in for defense, who might have been in for any number of reasons. But you empty the bench when you're in those late inning spots and you're not leading. You're trying to come from behind. And the Cardinals just do not have a group with that sort of utility, unfortunately. And as we're sitting there in the press room waiting for Oli Marmol to come in, a number of us writers, we're kind of just talking about how, look, there were these various scenarios where, hey, should Oli have done this? Should Oli have done that in terms of pinch hitting? But we keep coming back to there's not a great answer. These answers off the bench are not really answers. If you're Oli Marmol, you're deciding between the devil and the deep blue sea. There's not a great answer to the question. Not a definitive one. Yes, I am totally fine with anybody saying, I would have done this. I would have brought in Dylan. I would have brought in Crawford. I would have whatever. I cannot argue with you. But the gains you're making on those decisions are debatable at best. Like, okay, Michael Ciani should never have taken that last at bat. I'm cool with that. Do you know he's got a higher OPS on the season than Dylan and Crawford, who are both sub 500? Those are your answers for a late inning pinch spot off the bench. It's ridiculous that the Cardinals just don't have anybody right now for Oli Marmol to turn to. And as we're in there in the interview room waiting for him to come in, talking about it, some of us kind of thought, yeah, this could be something that really doesn't get answered in more depth until tomorrow's pregame. Wednesday pregame in Oli's office, you can ask a few of those questions that on camera might be a little bit more sensitive answers, and you don't want to get into a spot. Look, we know that over the weekend there was some tension in some of those post games, and so sometimes just the function of it is that when every post game is televised, as writers, it might be easier to ask your question the next day, but of course you don't get that quote or that answer for your story the night before. That's kind of the rock and the hard place decision, but obviously some of these questions we're going to be asked about, you just might get a better answer the next day. But I'll credit Katie Woo, who asked very tactfully and I think got an answer that maybe didn't flow for the written word, but when you hear her questions almost made the answers because it was just Oli agreeing with the premise that there's not a lot of flexibility and not many options for what he can do with this bench. So we'll play the audio of the questions and his answers as well, which I really do think kind of drives home the point of what is going on with this Cardinals bench and why last night there really weren't better decisions to be made. And even if you liked somebody that didn't get used, it's not like that guy would have necessarily statistically been likely to come through in that spot either. So let's go to our first bit of audio from last night, the interview room at the podium with Oli Marmol, asked by Katie Woo about the bench and the utility of deploying those resources late.
Oli, as this game goes on, how do you manage when to deploy your late inning bats off the bench?
I mean, you have Chapman come in there. You take your shot with Vermin. You know that if it comes back around, regardless of handedness, right, left, Herrera takes a pretty good at bat over Pajes. Pajes did a phenomenal job behind the plate tonight, though. So you know that's going to be a spot where you can do it as well. And then with the righty on the mound, that's about it.
So that was the first time that it was brought up in the postgame. And then Jeff Jones follows up with this.
Yeah.
To Katie's question, is the reason to go to Fermin there rather than Dylan because you're holding Dylan if Chapman's still in the game for Ciani? Is that what that lines up for you? Okay.
Yeah.
So later on, you may need to go with Dylan for Ciani to flip him to the right side against Aroldis Chapman, so you can go right on left. And Dylan at that point is your only righty available off the bench other than Ivan Herrera. That's part of the problem too, is whether it's Herrera or Pajes starting at catcher, the other is your only real righty specific option off the bench. You'll have a switch hitter and Dylan off the bench, and I guess though you do have Jose Fermin off the bench, but he's OPSing 348, so not a robust option, but they ultimately did use him because that's what you have to do. It's a strategy game for a manager. So these are the pieces that you should be able to deploy late, and there's just not a lot of utility to it, as we've talked about. But then Katie gets into the heart of the issue here with Oli, and it's not an easy thing to do because we saw you asked the wrong question, gets taken a little personally last weekend. You saw what can happen. This went a lot better than that, and we got at least, although he didn't expound upon it very much, we got Oli to agree with the premise that we're all seeing when it comes to this bench.
What would you like to see from your bench? Because, I mean, this is just one example, but it seems like a lot of the guys on the bench tonight have roles that are defined strictly for certain situations. Does that complicate things for you?
It does. But you deal with what you got. I mean, if you'd like to give me an example, I'm happy to answer it. Yeah.
Okay, let's go with Crawford, right? We know he was brought in to be reserve case, and he's done a nice job there. Didn't take the at-bat for Ciani there, and I'm not saying that he should or shouldn't, but that's one example. There's another example of having to use Carlson in case you want to pinch it for Ciani and you need another center fielder. It just seems at this point there are limited options as to how you can deploy your bench in late innings in games like this.
There is, because of the reasons you just described. Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
So, I mean, there you go. It doesn't get much more point blank than that. There are limitations, and those are the reasons. If you're pinch hitting for Sciani, Dillon's got to be either the one doing it or the one to come in next to play defense. Now, at the very end of the game, you could do it, and that's not really as much of a factor. You could have pinch hit Dillon for Sciani. You could have pinch hit Crawford for Sciani in that 9th inning at bat against David Bednar. Either could bat from the left side. So maybe that's the argument of what should have happened. Again, I think you almost just, if you're Oli, I understand just kind of letting status quo be, because Sciani does have a higher OPS than both of those guys. But, you know, Dillon's been coming on a little stronger recently. So is Crawford as well. And it's like, it should be, the bench makeup should be such that there is an obvious guy to bring in that spot. Maybe somebody with a, 700 OPS that has a little pop, has good, consistent, like Alec Burleson could be that guy. Last year he was that guy for the bench, but guess what? He's one of your best hitters in your lineup now. It just shows where the offense is, that the Cardinals don't have those guys. And maybe at full strength you'd have that, but I also think Burleson is worthy of an everyday spot in the lineup for sure at this point. But that's sort of the idea, is that the bench has been watered down from what it was last year. Injuries are partially responsible, but we knew that the bench didn't have utility coming in. We knew that, like, in terms of the flexibility defensively, Carpenter is not a position. You have Alec Burleson. He can play first base or outfield. Carpenter, I guess, could play first base, but he's really only ever going to DH. I don't really think you'll see him play the field hardly at all. There's just no reason to do it at this point. But you have a guy that's hitting, 190 as a primary DH option off your bench. There's not a lot of utility to that. You have Brandon Crawford, who is a light-hitting shortstop, but you need to have that backup shortstop. It's just a lack of better planning in the offseason by Mo that Crawford was the best they could do with that spot, right? And the market did get after him a little bit because they had to, and I'm not saying like Tim Anderson's been having a good year either. He's not. But they just didn't come up with a more sensible way to handle that roster spot. And that's basically half your bench, because one of the guys on your bench is always going to be a backup catcher. And really, it's less than half, because you're only going to have 4 guys on your bench with one of them DHing. So your hands are tied in a lot of ways as a manager when that's what you're working with. And it's not really any one individual's fault. It's not Brandon Crawford's fault. It's not Carpenter or, even Dylan Carlson. Individually, they all you'd like to see them performing better, because then it's not the same scenario. But it's like when all of those things, when Jose Fermin rakes in Memphis, but he gets up here and is not performing when they give him opportunities. And I get it. It's more difficult to sporadically play and perform than it is to know you're going to be in the everyday lineup in Memphis. But like, they don't have anybody that's taken the bull by the horns from that category. And it's haunting him, and it haunted them last night. I'm not saying that Oli made all the perfect decisions. I'm saying that if he had done something different, I still don't know that it would have been just clear and obvious that that's what he should have done. Do you hear how you sound if you're saying, oh, you've got to pinch hit Brandon Crawford? You sound like an insane person. But I think there was a case to be made that he should have. I would have personally done it. Dylan, I probably would have gotten in there at some point. But again, you're worried if you do it too soon that, all right, who plays center field if you're really wanting to take Sciani out later on? Because lefty-righty, it doesn't really matter. He's not really a productive at bat necessarily late in games against high-profile relievers. And he ends up facing David Bednar and, loses the battle, and not very surprisingly. So it's just, there is not a lot going on when it comes to those options off the bench. And look, if Ryan Helsley is able to get it together a little bit quicker in his outing, he walked 2, gave up a hit, sandwiched there in between to load the bases. Maybe things go differently if Mason Wynn can get a good grip on the throw home. He dives to his right and stops a 106-mile-per-hour rocket right back at him with the infield drawn in. The reaction time it took to do that was unbelievable. But then he double-clutched the throw, and I think he didn't get a great grip on it, kind of threw a slider to home plate, he said, and Pages was not able to handle it. It bounced. He tried to corral it, get the force out at home, couldn't do it. So that run scores, and then later on you get a sacrifice fly to left, and they were able to keep it there at 2-0, but it wasn't enough. And it's so funny because like that, I'm always harping on the infield in stuff. That was a spot where I'm like, you kind of have to have the infield in. It'd be a different story if it was already the 10th inning and you had the bases loaded against you in a tie game, because you figure you're going to score a run too when you get the man-for-man on second base, the automatic runner. So in the 10th, I almost would say play back, get the double play ball, trade 2 outs for the run, and then just make sure you score your man-for-man in the bottom half. But knowing the Cardinals weren't getting anybody on for free, this was just a plain old 9th inning. I think you got to have the infield in to try to cut down the run at the plate. It works perfectly, and Mason, unbelievable stop. The reaction time is just ridiculous to do what he did, but wasn't able to complete the throw. So Cardinals lose the Paul Skenes game despite a brilliant outing by Miles Mikolas. He allowed no hits until the 7th inning. Didn't take the loss, which is good. Didn't give up any runs. Arenado can be credited for the great defensive play that helped ensure that, but ultimately, offensively, the Cardinals couldn't do anything. I really thought you get Skenes out of the game, they're going to get to this bullpen, and Cardinals can win. That was the recipe. Did not anticipate the Pirates bringing Skenes back out for the 7th as he approached 100 pitches, but also they had a chance. I mean, they got Arenado on second base, got him to scoring position once again in that 7th inning, ended up on third base against Aroldis Chapman. Cardinals could not come through. So that's a tough loss, man, and they're still kind of muddling along as the standings are very attainable at this point still. The Cardinals are right in the mix, but they're in last. I mean, they are. They opened the day now on Wednesday in last place in the NL Central. Percentage point behind the Reds and Cubs, who both lost yesterday, which is nice. The Pirates are now up to second. I mean, it's going to be topsy-turvy the whole way through. And that wild card is still the same way, that it's a sub-500 record that's getting you in. The Giants are just a tick above. Cardinals are a half game behind San Francisco, but there are also 4 teams in between the Cardinals and Giants for that last spot. So, and the Nationals are only a half game behind the Cardinals. It is pandemonium in the National League standings. Washington's won 4 in a row, too. They could pass the Cardinals tonight. Cardinals need to get going. I think John Mozeliak needs to get going, though. It's his bench that did it. You know, that's the way I look at it late in this game. Ryan Helsley, you know, relievers are not going to end the year with a 0 ERA. So if there's an occasional blow up by a guy, I'm not going to overreact to that. It's unfortunate, the timing of it. But offensively, you didn't get anything done, and you had chances. 8 hits in the game, reached via walk, had the catcher's interference ultimately that I kind of briefly alluded to earlier with Ivan Herrera. We thought the game was over, and then it wasn't. But still couldn't come through in the clutch with somebody to take that at bat for Siani late in the game. So those are my thoughts on it. Let me know what yours are. And again, I might post that little clip of me getting shot, because that was, I think it was airsoft. I don't know what it was. I didn't stop to look, but it was jarring when it happened. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the Cardinals game. They lose 2-1 to the Pirates. Sorry for getting this up late. I know I normally have this up by like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. the night before. After everything that happened, I just had to go to sleep. I just had to get it done. So hopefully you get a chance to watch or listen to this before the next Cardinals game on Wednesday night. Cardinals are looking to bounce back against the Pirates there at Busch Stadium. We'll see if they can do it, because otherwise you're likely going to end this series in last place in the division. If not. Sonny Gray, it's the Gray game. He's taking on Falter for the Pittsburgh side, Bailey Falter. We'll see if Sonny Gray can get his mojo back for the Cardinals. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.